Well, she has a lot of fans. Members of the White House press corps gushing over White House Press Secretary Jen Psaki. Their comments can be found in this report entitled, "The Awkward Feeling of Rooting for the White House Press Secretary." Well, that's transparent. ABC News' Jonathan Karl calls Psaki one of the most well-qualified press secretaries we've ever had. And the New York Times, Peter Baker, chimes in with this: "She's a pro, you know? She's unflappable." All of this, as the Pew Research Center found, President Biden has received less negative coverage from the legacy media than any president in 30 years. It also notes half of all stories about the Biden administration mention former President Trump. Power panel now, radio talk show host Leslie Marshall, former Wisconsin Congressman Sean Duffy, both Fox News contributors. Welcome to the program. So, Sean, I'm going to come to you first and ask what you make of this.
Well, first, in the clip you played, where the Washingtonian says they're awkwardly rooting for Jen Psaki, that's not awkward. You have a group of left-wing Democrats who are in the press corps who are actually rooting for Joe Biden. Also in that report, Harris, that came out and said that the evening newscast during the election gave Donald Trump 92% negative stories, only 34% negative stories for Joe Biden. As you talked to Alan West, just think if Republicans had made those racial slurs towards a Democrat. The media rightfully would be outraged, but kind of gloss over it when it's Democrats who make racial slurs. Or when Donald Trump was on the border and there was a mini crisis, the media collectively lost their minds. Joe Biden has a real crisis and they gloss over it. And the problem with this is when the media behaves like a state media and doesn't actually hold governments and politicians accountable, the people lose faith in governments, they lose faith in the media, and they disengage with the government, and that's a bad consequence. Actually, the media should put aside their political leanings and actually truly engage and get stories that matter to the American people, and that's not happening right now.
You know, Leslie, as a former journalist, you and I have talked about your past and my present, and I think we agree on this fact. You don't have to be adversarial. You don't have to be nasty. I mean, you can like somebody and still go in and do your job. I wouldn't brag about the fact that you might be doing beer or dinner with that person, because that's a conflict of interest. But at this point, aren't we all rooting for the administration to do a great job and to see transparency at that lectern with Jen Psaki so that we can get our questions answered and the American people know what's going on? But the treatment with her, and you compare that to Sarah Huckabee Sanders, which got personal and mean and nasty from this press corps, and then Kayleigh McEnany and others, is there a partisan divide here?
Well, quite frankly, you know, I agree with you, and I've always said you got to report the facts and you don't make the story about you, and business is business, like you said, the line in the sand. However, let's look at some numbers. 41% of all media coverage during the Trump administration was about Donald Trump. That is more coverage any president, including Joe Biden, ever had in the history of our nation. Two, in the first 100 days, after the first 100 days in the Obama administration, favorable writing and reporting about Barack Obama fell by 16%, and by the way, continued to fall. So there is a honeymoon period for a lot of presidents the first 100 days. By the way, that coverage of Donald Trump, 80% from Republicans, so it actually was more favorable. Now let's talk about Jen Psaki. I think what's going on here is when you have a former press secretary like Ms. Sanders, that when she had said, when she was questioned, are the press the enemy of the people, and she wouldn't say they weren't. Admitted she lied to them under oath, asked them to give thanks before answering questions, stopped having follow-up questions, and having some press passes attempted to be revoked, like one of the big reporters, I don't have to mention his name, at CNN. I think they're just looking at the way they're being treated differently now than they had with Donald Trump's first press secretary, who also on 2 occasions didn't hold press conferences, one time for 41 days and one time for 45 days. So I think it's just feeling that they're not an enemy of the people or an enemy of the press secretary.
Sean, I come back to you.
Well, I would just say that if you look at the way the press corps treated, as you mentioned, Donald Trump's press secretaries, they were hostile. And the CNN reporter that you mentioned actually wouldn't give the microphone back to the young intern who was trying to control the debate in the room. And that's why he was kicked out. It was a lack of respect that the media gave the Trump administration compared to the fawning press and the genteel nature in which they support Democrats, because they are Democrats. And that's the problem with the media.
Yeah, you mentioned that number, Leslie, and I want to press in because I got to go. 80% public or positive coverage for President Trump came from Republicans. We're talking about the media, though. So I'm a little confused by that. I mean, there have been so many stories written about the negativity that was written on Donald Trump. But what's fascinating is as they write about Biden, they can't seem to do that without dropping the name of the former President Trump. I would assume that's because they maybe want people to read it. I don't know. All right, we'll move on. Good to see you both. Thank you.